عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين، ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين المنتجبين، لا سيما بقية الله في الأراضين، روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين. For the hastening and the return of our Imam, let's recite a salawat.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Abu Abdullah, in his sacrifice, the uprising that started in the year 60, and the portion of it that had to do with the Imam ending on the 10th of the Muharram of the year 61, this movement, this event, as I've tried to explain over the last few nights, a couple of pointers, I think we should have come to an understanding that it was not a movement that was intended to end on the 10th of Muharram. The objective that was set out by Imam al-Hussein to be accomplished was to bring the ummah of the Prophet back onto its tracks. That was not something that would happen or did happen by simply 100 plus 130 people being slaughtered in a plain we know as Karbala. Or anywhere else. The shahada, the death of, the loss of life, the slaughtering, this was not something that in and of itself was going to accomplish that. It was something that was supposed to continue. In what ways? Part of it, the Ahlul Bayt of the Imam did, as we explained yesterday, going from city to city. Instead of it being an accomplishment for the perpetrators, it became the continuation of the movement of Imam al-Hussein. That's what played that portion. But if it would have been limited to that, so they went to Karbala on Arba'in, 40 days after Ashura, they ended up in Arba'in. After that, they went to Medina. In Medina, as we explained, you must have heard, Imam Zayn al-Abidin did not allow the caravan to just enter the city. He said, wait, we have to wait out here. He sent messengers, let people know the family, the household of Hussein is back, but without Hussein. He made a big scene. It had to be noticed as part of the movement. Is that the end of it? No. You've heard Imam Zayn al-Abidin, besides all of the other things that he did, teaching his companions like Abu Khalid al-Kabuli, Abu Hamzeh al-Thumali, and others. Besides that, besides as-Sahifa as-Sajjadiyya, besides all the other great things that he did, which are all part of one major package that leads to the objective of the Ahlul Bayt, in regards to Karbala, something we have all heard, Imam Zayn al-Abidin constantly cried. Imam Zayn al-Abidin would make it a point to go to anyone who is about to slaughter a lamb and asks them the question, did you give water to this lamb? He said, yes, of course we are Muslim. Why are you asking that question? Because they killed my father without giving him water. Why is Imam Zayn al-Abidin doing this? Reminders of Karbala. Reminders of Karbala. He would sit under the sun. They would ask him, why don't you go find some shade? Go. So my father's body was left under the sun for 3 days. We hear these things, we cry. Yes, we should cry, as Imam Zayn al-Abidin did. But we need to understand, this is not simply a son that can't control his emotions because his father was killed like that. Do we have anywhere in Islam, we see people that are, some of the ways people are tortured and killed today are more horrific than any scene that you can imagine in Karbala. I guarantee you, if you hear what Daesh does to people, it did to people, some of it is more horrific than anything you've seen Shimr do in Karbala. If the Munafiqeen, as Iranians call them, Mujahideen Khalq, this group, this terrorist organization, funded, supported by the West, that killed Iranians, killed Iraqis, the Intifada Sha'baniyah, one of the major instruments used by Saddam against the uprising were again these Iranians that were in Iraq as Mujahideen Khalq. The way they killed people, some of it is very horrific. Do we have anywhere in Islam encouraging, if you are the son of someone who was killed even in the way of Allah in that way, constantly remember them? We don't have that in Islam. It's not Imam Zayn al-Abidin just getting emotional because it's his father. Or anywhere some general recommendation we have in Islam telling anyone whose father's been slaughtered in that way or killed in that way, whose family's been treated that way, to commemorate that, to remember that, to cry for that every occasion that you find. This was to remind people, Karbala, Karbala, Karbala. Hussein, what he did, he was treated in that way. Reminders, questions, why, what happened, hate his, another thing. In Ziyarat Ashura, what's mentioned? It's either salam or it's la'an. It's one of the two. Be reminded who did what they did. Do curse on them, curse them. You need to hate them. Why? Because Yazid died, Shimr died, Ubaydullah bin Ziyad died. Is that the only la'an do we have? Allahumma al'an awwala zalimin ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. Anyone who continues that path. At the time of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt there, the enemies of Islam there, the enemies of humanity at that point in time, be reminded what happened there, who did what, love these people and their continuation. سلم لمن سالمكم. لمن سالمكم when? Back in history, each person that says it, you have to look around. Who is the party of Hussein at their day and age? Who is the party opposing the party of Hussein? Ziyarat Ashura tells you this. All of these ziyarat, this is the continuation of the movement of Imam al-Hussein. It was never intended for it to end on the 10th of Muharram of the year 61 or on the 20th of Safar of that year, or upon entering Medina that year, or even the following year, or by the end of the Imam of Imam Zayn al-Abidin. In fact, the Imams increased their reminders of Muharram. Visit Hussein every Thursday night. Visit him on the day of Ashura. Visit him on Arba'in. Visit him 15th of Sha'ban. Use these words. Be reminded of this. It's still the movement. Have you ever asked yourself, some of you have probably heard, during the time of the Abbasids, during the time of the Abbasids, not the Umayyads, Banu Umayyah were over. During the time of the Abbasids, close to the time of, if I remember accurately, Imam al-Jawad, salamullah alayhi, Imam al-Hadi, around that time, the Abbasids forbidden anyone to go to do ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein, to the extent that they would cut hands off if you would go there. The Imam said, go, even if they cut your hands off. Why did the government have an issue with people going to Karbala? Because the government felt threatened that ziyarah is continuing the mission of Hussein. Hussein was against Yazid at that time. Anyone who visits Hussein today is going against the people who were doing the same thing that Yazid did at that time. It's continuing, that's what the ziyarah meant. One of the elements that we have the Ahlul Bayt developing as part of this movement is the Minbar of Al-Hussein salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. The lectures. There's supposed to be conversation. There's supposed to be discussions. The point we're trying to make here, which is the first step in this, tonight's topic for those who know, is the Minbar of Imam al-Hussein, the Minbar of Muharram. We have to understand the context. What is it about this? Why don't we just gather and, for instance, just remember the tragedies in a way where we just cry and leave? If it's an emotional thing, if it's simply a spiritual thing that we're supposed to do, and by the way, it has all those effects as well. That's the beauty of Islam. The beauty of Islam. And this political movement of Imam al-Hussein is spiritual. And the spirituality of Imam al-Hussein is political. These are not separated. This is not one of those schools of thought that is deficient, that is simply a political philosophy. Islam is not like that. Islam is not a spiritual philosophy without politics, and it's not a political school of thought without spirituality. It has got everything in it. And everything is not separated. That political move is what got those shuhada of Karbala, to where every people after Ashura say to the shuhada, not to Imam al-Hussein, Ya laytana kunna ma'akum fanafuza ma'akum fawzan azima. Why is it that there's got to be a minbar? Why is it that there's got to be lectures? Why is it that speeches have become part of this? When we understand the context of the commemoration of Muharram, the commemoration of Imam al-Hussein, the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, all of that, we understand that even in our latmiyat, in the nohas that we recite, in the morning, everything, that holistic approach, the continuation of the movement of Imam al-Hussein, that needs to be understood. With the minbar, that's where whatever is said has got to be in line with the movement of Imam al-Hussein at that particular time that the talk is being given. In that context, the speakers are supposed to be understanding where the movement of Hussein, the Hussein of the time, the Imam of our time, the movement of the Ahlul Bayt. Let me briefly mention this, it may be alien to some of us here. The movement of the Ahlul Bayt never stopped. The Ahlul Bayt themselves, with their presence, led it for 250 years. After that, during the period of the minor occultation, they didn't just leave it. There were Nawab from the year 260 after the Hijrah to the year 328 or 329 after the Hijrah. The Imams led it through the Nawab. After that, they said, refer to the ulama, أَمَّا الْحَوَادِثُ الْوَاقِعَ فَارْجِعُوا فِيهَا إِلَى رُوَاةِ حَدِيثِنَا, along with many other ahadith, riwayat. And besides the words of the Ahlul Bayt, the seerah, the conduct, over the years of the Ahlul Bayt, from Imam Sadiq salamullah alayhi onwards, tells us that this was the path. Even the height of it is the minor occultation. That movement continued. Some other point, maybe in 15th of Sha'ban, if you have a speaker or a program, perhaps they can cover this to understand that for all these over 1,000 years of Imam al-Hujjah, he's not hiding in some corner doing nothing, or perhaps just doing prayer and dhikr and fasting and sujoods day in and day out. God, make my appearance nearer. Because it's related to the topic, let me just share one hadith that you already, I'm sure all of you know this, but think about it in the way I'm presenting to you. They asked the Imams, what is the purpose of having an Imam if he's going to be in ghaibah, if he's in occultation? What's the purpose? Why just have someone be born whenever the time is right? What's the objective? If we're not going to see him, we can't communicate with him, he's not going to lead us. These things are what I'm adding to it. The question is simply this: what is the objective of having, or what's the purpose of an Imam in ghaibah? The Imam said, use an analogy. He said, Imam in ghaibah is like the sun behind the cloud. Oh, we all know this hadith. Is there anyone that never heard this before? I'm sure there's no one in this room that's never heard that hadith. Everyone has heard this hadith. Do we ever think that the analogy here is of the sun and not the cloud? Ghaibah is the cloud. The Imam is the sun. Well, I ask you, is there a difference between the sun when there is a cloud or there isn't a cloud? The sun does exactly the same things. The only difference is when the cloud is there, you can't pinpoint where exactly the sun is. You only see and receive the benefits and the blessings of it. You can't say where exactly it is. You don't know from what point it's doing. You just see the benefits. That's all that happens. Otherwise, the sun behaves in the exact same way. The Imam is the Imam. He leads. That's the definition of an Imam, a leader. He leads. The difference is in ghaibah, you don't see him. The benefits of his leadership are what you see. Look at the izzah of Islam today. That's developing. There was a day they stole Muslim land and did whatever they wanted, and the Muslims didn't have any ability to do anything. Now the idiots think they killed Iranians in Damascus. Sayyid Hassan says, no, these were Lebanese and we will retaliate. A week later, retaliation is there. So you don't play around, you don't mess around with the Muslims. This is a great accomplishment. And other things that we all know. You're following the news, alhamdulillah. You think this is possible without the leadership of the Imam? Just we don't see him. We see other figures, we revere them, and it's great, that's right. Without the leadership of the Imam, it is absolutely impossible for these accomplishments to occur. This is not just a claim. We can back it up with loads of hadith, theologically, philosophically, from the science of hadith, from the ziyarat, and also historically. If you listen to those who seem to be leading this, you pay attention, you realize this is not from him. I'm not claiming anyone meets the 12th Imam. The 12th Imam is not limited in that way. That's a very horrible understanding that we have. We think that the Imam needs to go and speak to the person to go. No. The Imam, وَمَا أَدْرَاكُمْ مَنْ الْإِمَامِ. The Imam is way above and beyond these things. What was the point we're making? The point was this. Look, the movement of the Imams never ended. The khatib, the speaker that is giving a lecture for Muharram has got to see where is the ummah today. Who's representing the Imam today? What direction do we have? And who's opposing? That silmun liman salamakum wa harbun liman harabakum. Both of those has got to be seen and heard in that lecture. Now, why am I mentioning this? Why is this even a topic? I don't know, maybe some of you speak, but most of you don't give lectures in Muharram. So why am I giving you this? The importance is both speakers and listeners need to understand what they're expecting in Muharram. We don't have this idea in Islam and in Tashayyu that you get to have a person, he goes and gives whatever he wants, and then people just listen and say, okay, this is Minbar Husseini, and the respect of the Minbar, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, and this person gave his lecture, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad on that person, and get up and leave, and no matter what they said, excuse me, that's not how things work. That's not Islam, that's not Tashayyu'. It's not that. Listeners need to understand, if they see the direction of the Minbar is moving in the complete opposite, instead of silmun liman salamakum wa harbun liman harabakum, it's silmun liman harabakum wa harbun liman salamakum. Exact opposite. There's a responsibility that listeners have as well. We need to understand this. The direction of the lectures of Muharram has got to be in line with the movement of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. It's got to be continuing that. There's two types of speeches we need to be careful of. Alhamdulillah, the very fact that we are seeing the developments these days that we are seeing shows that the Minbar of Imam al-Hussein has been moving in the right direction. Otherwise, the Ummah should have moved in the completely wrong direction, the opposite direction. So overall, we see that. However, this doesn't mean that we don't need to be vigilant, we don't need to be careful, we don't need to be cautious. There is a lot of effort by the Yazids of today to use the Minbar of Imam al-Hussein to preach a message that is either contrary to the path of Imam al-Hussein, or at least it doesn't allow people to move in his direction. Both of these problems are there. There are manabir, there are lectures, there are speeches that pacify the masses. Instead of encouraging, Imam al-Hussein shouted as loud as he could, do you not see أن الحق لا يعمل به? Don't you see it? Do something. That's the message of Imam al-Hussein. Some people's agenda could be, inshallah there isn't, we need to be careful. We know that these people, the Yazids of the time, are trying to put as much as they can into this so that the Minbar turns into something that encourages people, oh, the akhlaq of the Ahlul Bayt is to be nice to everyone. Well, sorry, the ziyarah says harbun liman harabakum. It's not only silmun, and then when it says silmun liman salamakum, I befriend silmun liman salamakum, wa harbun liman harabakum, wa waliyyun liman walakum, wa aduwwun liman adakum. The full version of it in Ziyarat Ashura is this passage.